remember when political scandals meant something? Like when Watergate dismantled Richard Nixon's presidency, when President Clinton was impeached for lying about an affair, when senators and congressmen resigned after overstepping legal or ethical lines. Heck, for a while there, missteps didn't even need to be all that scandalous. Ask Howard Dean, whose 2004 presidential campaign stalled out completely after incessant media coverage of a bizarre yelp he let out during a campaign rally. Yes, those were the days. Today, it seems scandals, big or small, don't move the needle quite like they used to. How come? That's one of the questions party politics co-host and University of Houston political science professor Brandon Rottinghaus tackles in his book, Scandal: Why Politicians Survive Controversy in a Partisan Era. Brandon, good morning.
Good morning, Craig.
As we talk about the changing nature of political scandals and their consequences, or lack thereof, we welcome you to the conversation with questions or comments at talk@houstonmatters.org or 713-440-8870. Why don't political scandals seem to matter quite the way they once did?
It's a great question, and I think I share your kind of concern about this because we need scandals to matter, and I'll explain a bit why. But really, a lot of the reason scandals don't matter anymore is because of the way that modern politics works in a lot of different ways, and that's that you have hyper-partisanship, you've got a siloed media environment, you've got motivated reasoning where people believe what they want to believe and aren't really willing to engage in the truth, and you've got a short attention span because of this kind of rapid news cycle. All these things are creating this moment where the scandals just don't matter that much and for very long.
Is it also just the tonnage of scandals?
Yeah, it feels like that there's just a lot more friction than there used to be. And one of the things I find in the book is that we can manufacture scandals out of very little. And that kind of outrage machine is really driving a lot of people's kind of sensibility about what is and is not a scandal. And it's harder for people to really sift through it all because everything feels outrageous nowadays.
All right, so what is a scandal and what isn't?
Well, in the book, what I do is to identify scandals that are legal wrongdoing, that there has to be some kind of possible infraction if the allegations are true, or something that's morally incorrect or morally problematic, like adultery. With that in mind, there are something like 300 plus presidential scandals. We have 300 something gubernatorial scandals and a very similar number of congressional scandals since about Watergate. So there are a lot of scandals that are happening, and it's certainly the case that we're not going to be away from them, but it is harder think now for people to be able to identify what really matters to them. And one of the things we know from the research on this is that although scandals are still sort of impactful for some people in some cases, especially when the scandal's more recent, if it involves a kind of financial issue, but it generally speaking is for a lot of people something they're willing to look past because they have an ideological connection to a candidate. They like the policy issues the candidates talk about, and scandals kind of rank 3 to 4, kind of points down on something that they really care about.
Is it different in politics than it is in other walks of life?
Probably not. I'd love to do some additional work that looks at sort of celebrity politics because we see a lot of bounce back there too, right? People like Charlie Sheen, are able to kind of survive these scandals and really thrive in a way. And it is not something that is debilitative the way that we see, in past times where a politician or like a celebrity engaged in some kind of activity that people don't like, they ultimately disappear from the scene. That's not the case anymore. You can lean into those scandals in a way that oftentimes is helpful for them in a kind of general sense.
Is it perhaps that because we are in such a hyper-partisan world, we simply assume that all politicians lie? Everything out of their mouths is a lie, or that somebody's always doing something shady, or that we just don't care as much?
Yeah, I think it's all of the above to some degree. And it's certainly exacerbated by politicians who are able to use a kind of playbook to get out of these scandals. They'll say things like, well, it's not so much, me that's the problem. It's that they're coming for you and I'm in the way. Or they'll talk about how the scandal is just a witch hunt against them for some other unseen kind of political issue or some policy fight they're in. So there are a lot of ways that politicians themselves have been able to adapt this new kind of scandal playbook to be able to survive these scandals a little bit longer.
Does it vary depending on who we're talking about, which politicians?
It does. And one of the points of the research is that if you're an elected official, it often is the case that scandals aren't going to hurt you electorally or in terms of like your general mayoral career. Sometimes it does, of course. There are high-profile cases where that's true, but there are also high-profile cases where it's not true. So there's some variety in that. But one thing that's unmistakable is that since Watergate, we're really seeing a decline in how impactful scandals are in terms of removing a person from office, either for the purposes that they would take on their own, say to resign from the office, or where the voters may decide to vote them out. People ask if it's a Trump effect. It's not exactly a Trump effect, although Donald Trump has perfected this in a way that is certainly, I think, a kind of model for how other people are surviving these kinds of scandals. But it definitely is something we're seeing more and more. Really, it's the kind of 90s that we see as the cut point, and that's the kind of moment where we see hyper-partisanship really take root, and that's really the trigger for a lot of the ways that scandals are less impactful.
Well, one thing that certainly seems to have changed is there was an era, and maybe it was up until the 90s, where if an elected official at just about any level of office was involved in something considered scandalous, it would reach a threshold at which they would be shamed into, as you said, resigning themselves, or they'd say, okay, I can't go on with this. I can't put my family through this. I can't. Whatever it is, the heat has gotten too hot. I'm getting out of the kitchen. It doesn't seem like many do. Some do, but not that many anymore.
I think that's a great point. There's something happening with respect to the politicians' willingness to absorb a lot of this negativity for their family, for their political careers, for their political parties. There's a lot of a backsplash on these issues that politicians now just aren't as willing to ignore, or not as willing to accept. So that's definitely something that we're seeing as part of this. I don't know how to explain what that is, except just that politicians are power motivated. They want to stay in office. And so they're willing to do a lot of things to be able to maintain that, which often include taking some of these arrows that otherwise they could just avoid if they were to step aside.
Do me a favor, throw on those headphones because we want to take a call. We have Joseph on the line from Tomball. Joseph, what's your question or comment?
Well, that reminds me of this. I don't know if he was a congressman from Rosenberg, I believe, that he has a fake Facebook account that claiming that somebody was harassing him or something. But the reason why they are doing this is because they want to draw attention to themselves. And obviously, it's a free advertising that has been working for Donald Trump for 10 years now. And it continues working for them.
All right. Thanks for the call and for the comment. I believe he's referring to Fort Bend County Judge K.P. George and one of his staffers who had set up some fake social media accounts that suggested that somebody out there was attacking them. And so that became a big scandal. He's still in office at the moment anyway. So there's that. And then, as he said, as the caller said, this becomes free advertising. In some ways, it's the old thing that, any publicity, even bad publicity, is good publicity, right?
I think that's totally true. This is definitely an insightful comment. And we're seeing this a lot in modern politics where it doesn't matter what attention you're getting as long as you're getting attention. Because one of the things that's odd about scandals is that it actually helps in lots of ways. It's able to focus on you and your issues. It's a way to be able to prime the base. If you can use it effectively, you can say that this is a kind of partisan moment and that rallies the supporters that you have. And sometimes that's enough to win. It also is a huge boon for fundraising, and that wasn't always the case. So we're seeing now politicians able to really benefit financially from this because they can use this as leverage in the fundraising. So I totally agree that the way that these scandals emerge and the way that they carry on is sometimes a plus for politicians. That's a scary thing because, as I mentioned, if we lose scandals, then we lose the accountability that it often brings. The real crisis here is that scandals are a canary in the coal mine. And if we have this political moment where they don't matter as much anymore, then we lose the ability for those scandals to be able to generate the good things that we care about, like ethics reform, which it does happen eventually. We can see this as a way to recalibrate the kind of politicians that we want to have in office. The kind of internal audits and financial investigations that do happen after scandals are less important and don't have as much relevance after, if scandals don't matter. So there are all these sort of things that are definitely on the chopping block if scandals go away.
You mentioned President Trump and that it may not be, you say it's not just him, but he's maybe the best at navigating all of this. which came first, the changing attitudes towards scandals or President Trump and his approach leading to that change?
That's a great question. I think that the attitudes had changed first. Some of the research I do is to kind of drill in on the Clinton years, where, as you mentioned, there were this sort of high-profile scandals, some of which involved the president. And one of the things that we found is that basically you don't see any real impact of the president's scandals on his legacy. That's actually true for a lot of presidents who faced scandals in office. I also had a little survey project that looked at Mayor Turner. When he left office, there was a little mini scandal where he was asked to, basically the Houston First was asked to pay for a little book that he created. It was a kind of history of his time in office, and it, ruffled some feathers and became a little bit of a controversy. And what I found was that basically people didn't much care about it. And it was a small thing and didn't matter that much in the grand scheme of things. But it's another example of just how, when you consider all the other factors like accountability and you consider partisanship, these things just don't matter as much for people.
Let's get in one more call. Lee is in League City. Lee, what's your question or comment?
I was asking about the Al Franken effect, as I call it, where he was forced to resign in a scandal that maybe didn't rise to the point where it was worth resigning. I think even some of the people have said they kind of regretted making that into a big issue. Is that some of the backlash against, scandals ruining political careers?
All right. Thanks for the call and for the question.
Yeah, it's a really great point. You certainly see a lot of politicians who've resigned say they wish they hadn't. Andrew Cuomo is a great example, who ran again for mayor of New York and ended up losing. But the fact that he was back, I think, did typify how politicians now look at scandals as being not career-ending. James McGreevey, who resigned as the governor of New Jersey, was run out of office effectively for lying about an adulterous affair he had with another man. This basically outed him and was a moral issue because of the affair. But he ran again for mayor of a smaller city in New Jersey and lost just yesterday. But again, it's an example, and he was very clear that he thought that this isn't something that nowadays would be a problem for a politician. So there are, I think, kind of changing nature of the way scandal functions for politicians, and they're seeing ways they can accommodate these kind of allegations of wrongdoing.
UH political science professor Brandon Rottinghaus co-hosts Houston Public Media's Party Politics program. He is the author of Scandal: Why Politicians Survive Controversy in a Partisan Era. Brandon, thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg.